Well, I want to start this morning with a question. What is your biggest pet peeve? Okay, so what is the one habit or the one behavior that just drives you crazy? And I want you to take a minute and just share with someone that's next to you. What's your biggest pet peeve? All right. Let's bring it back. Some of you guys are sharing 6 or 7, and you're just getting up all this pent-out anger and frustration. It's cleansing, isn't it? All right, who would be willing to share their pet peeve? Do we have anyone willing to share? Michael, I see Michael in the lighting booth is willing to share. When people say, I could care less. Yes. That's good. It is couldn't. All right, James. Oh, windshield wipers. Yes, going when there's no rain and they're squeaking across the windshield. Oh, it's awful. Leah, loogies. Just one word. Let's do one more. Yeah, Kelly. Oh, people writing using the wrong your or their. I could see how that would just make you angry inside. That is so annoying. Okay, so here's the thing about pet peeves. Pet peeves, for most people, pet peeve involves when something that we value deeply is violated, like appropriate English. So, for instance, I happen to really like order in my home. And so, for me, when someone in my family, at my home, opens a cupboard or a drawer to get something out, and then they just leave it open, it drives me absolutely insane. I'm like, how hard is it to just close the door? My goodness. I mean, why wouldn't you just close it? It's just totally unnecessary disorder. Walk into a room and the cupboards and drawers are open everywhere. Unbelievable. But for those of you, if my children are in here, I love you guys. Pet peeves usually flow out of something that we value being violated. Okay, for Jen, some of you might be wondering for Jen. I don't know if this is her biggest one. It's just the one that I know. Most of you know that know her well, know that she loves efficiency. Okay, for her, a dream day would be conquering her entire list, to get everything done that is on her list for the day. So for her, it's just wouldn't that be an amazing day? So you know what drives Jen crazy? When someone wastes her time. And one of her biggest pet peeves is when we're traveling as a family and we're in the carpool lane, and the person in front of us is actually driving slower than all the people in the other lanes. And so her mantra, when this happens, and she has a mantra, her mantra is, just because you can drive in the carpool lane does not mean that you have to. So if you want to go slow and she pounds on the steering wheel, she's like, get over! Lovely woman. Our pet peeves often derive from something, a violation of something that we value. You think about musicians. Musicians value beauty and they value art. And so if you want to drive a musician crazy, then sing off key or clap out of rhythm. Do something to wreck a beautiful piece of music. Now here's why I raise the issue. You ever wonder what God's pet peeve is or what his pet peeves are? It's kind of an important question. You ever wonder what drives God crazy? And it turns out that we're not left like completely in the dark on that. Mistreat a human being, violate community, damage a person, use somebody, freeze somebody out, ignore somebody, hold a grudge, spread gossip about somebody, hold back speaking the truth to somebody that really needs it, pass judgment on somebody because of their appearance, the way they look, the way they dress, maybe because of their race. Keep figuring out ways to spend more and more and more on yourself while there's little children that are starving to death. There are all kinds of different ways to violate someone, and it drives God crazy every time he sees that stuff. And we've been walking through this series on the Sermon on the Mount, the most complete sermon of Jesus that was ever recorded. And so much of what Jesus taught in this message is simply about honoring people. There's a theme that's woven like a thread all throughout Jesus' talk. And toward the beginning of his talk, Jesus says this in Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. He says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them." You know, remember that little phrase, the law and the prophets. Because that's kind of like a bookend for this whole section of Jesus' teaching. It's kind of like the first bookend. And in a minute, we'll get to the bookend at the back. But Jesus says, don't think that I've come to abolish the law and the prophets. And then he launches into the body of his talk. Okay, now the law and the prophets is essentially just the Old Testament. Okay, it's the scriptures as people in his day knew them. And he says he's come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. And then he talks about what lies at the heart of the law and the prophets. And a whole lot of it, is simply about treating people right. It's about honoring community. And throughout the Sermon on the Mount, you hear this little thing go back and forth with Jesus. Throughout the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus will say, okay, you've heard it said, and then he'll say what? But I tell you. You've heard it said, but I tell you. So he quotes something from the Old Testament, something they're familiar with, and then he gets down to the heart of what it's really about. He says, you've heard it said, you shall not murder. But I tell you, okay, there's more to love than just murder avoidance. So let's learn to let go of anger and hate. He says, you've heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you, there's more to marriage and loving a spouse and honoring a life partner than just adultery avoidance. He says, you've heard it said, do not break the oaths that you make to people. But I tell you, you shouldn't have to swear on oath at all to be believed. Just like become an honest person that consistently tells the truth. He says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Learn to live in such a way that people just trust you. He's saying you shouldn't have to say when you're telling somebody a story or you're promising to do something, you shouldn't have to say, dude, I swear. He says, you've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for the people that hurt you. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do something different from everybody else. Live differently. Refuse to retaliate. Learn to return hate with love. And then he talks about stuff like prayer and fasting and letting go of worry. He talks about resisting the urge to judge people. He says, do not judge or you too, what? Will be judged. So there's this common thread that's running all throughout the Sermon on the Mount, all throughout his talk. He's saying, look, the heart of the law and the prophets is pretty simple. God loves people. Like God loves all people. Therefore, when anybody gets careless in the way that they treat people, he says it drives God crazy. So Jesus comes to the end of this section that we've been studying now for a couple of months, like the body of the Sermon on the Mount. And he sums up all of his teaching on the law and the prophets. He encapsulates the whole thing with a single sentence. And we have come to call this sentence the golden rule. Okay? Do unto others as you'd what? Yeah. Jesus puts it like this. This is Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. He says, So, okay, in reference to everything he's been teaching, so in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. And then he adds, for this sums up the law and the prophets. And there's that little phrase again, the law and the prophets. And this is the bookend at the back of all of this brilliant teaching by Jesus. And this is why the golden rule is so central to what Jesus said. It's not just like some random nice little saying that he dropped one time. The idea is that it sums up the whole deal, the whole message. Now, Jesus was very concerned because by his day, people had reduced the law and the prophets, okay, the entire Torah, into legalisms and kind of like this superficial behavior modification. So they had all these tiny little rules, but Jesus was watching this and he's just going, but you guys are missing the whole point. And so Jesus says, look, I may not follow all of the little rules that you guys all made up, and my teaching is a little bit different than what you're hearing around these parts these days. But don't think that I have come to abolish the law and the prophets. I have come to truly fulfill them. Okay, I'm not teaching something new at all. I'm teaching you the heart of what you've always been taught. Stuff like how do you deal with anger? Stuff like how do you handle the human tendency toward judgmentalism? Stuff like how do you deal with your stuff and with money? How do you deal with sexuality? How do you deal with people that mistreat you? How do you deal with anxiety? Okay, and so on and so on. And then he comes to the end of all of this and he says, okay, now here's the deal, guys. I want to summarize this whole thing in a single sentence that all of you can take with you. And here it is. Think of all that you wish other people, think of all the ways that you wish other people would treat you. And then you just treat other people in that same way. And we go like, okay, really? I mean, wait a minute. It's that simple? Yep. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Isn't it more complicated than that, Jesus? Nope. Jesus says, you want to know the essence of what God is calling you to do and be? You want to know what God's will for your life is? It's this. Become a golden rule person. Live a golden rule life. Learn to apply the golden rule to every situation, to every person that you encounter. Learn to put yourself in the other person's shoes and ask, if I were that person, how would I want to be treated? And then do it. Become a golden rule person. Now, as we've seen, the backdrop for this entire sermon is the kingdom of God. Jesus had been traveling around, healing people in place after place and teaching the same thing in place after place. And the essence of his message was the same every single time, over and over again and again. He'd say, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. And we've been recognizing that for Jesus, heaven wasn't just some place that's far off that we go after we die. For Jesus, the kingdom was a very literal dominion or sphere. That realm where everything is as God wants it to be. And Jesus insisted to people over and over again, heaven has now come to earth. Heaven is near. Heaven can come to earth. It can be among you. Now, how does that happen? Well, it has a lot to do with the golden rule. When people live out the golden rule, heavenly things happen. And you've all seen this happen around you. You all could recite story after story of seeing this happen. And you know how beautiful it is. When someone simply pauses and asks, okay, if I were that person, how would I want to be treated? And then they go and do it. A couple of years ago, I saw this play out between two friends. And Jen and I, we've developed this little tradition with our kids and our family. For years now, we've watched the show The Amazing Race together as a family. How many of you watched that show or have watched that show? Okay, a few of you, quite a few of you. So they usually start with, and I don't know what, maybe you can tell me what it is, like 10 or 12 teams, something like that. Does anybody know? 12? Is it 12? So it's like the disciples, so that's good. So it's a biblical number. So they start with like 12 teams, and each team is made up of two people. And these two people, they don't just like get matched up randomly when they get on the show. They know each other previously. So it could be a husband and a wife. It could be a dating couple. It could be siblings. It could be people that have been friends for a long time, or coworkers, or whatever. But they pair up, and they decide beforehand. They apply, and they pair up, and they race against these other teams. Sometimes it's like exes. They get like exes on the show racing against the other teams. That gets juicy. But the teams of two, they race each other around the world in sort of this race for $1 million. Okay, winner gets $1 million, and at the end of every leg, one of the team that comes in last gets eliminated. Okay, so we've just loved watching this show with our kids because it provides tons of opportunities to talk about human behavior, and to talk about character, to talk about relationships and how to treat people. So this is like our little life laboratory. And because these people, they have to stop regularly to complete a challenge of some kind. And they can't move on in the race until they're done with that. And so you watch these teams like struggle. And if they're too slow, they know they're on the verge of getting eliminated from the race. So they get tired, and they get frustrated, and they get all stressed out. And it's really interesting to just watch how they react. Like how they treat their teammate, how they talk to each other, and how they interact. And some teams handle the stress and frustrations amazingly well. Other teams, they start yelling at each other, they start blaming each other. A lot of teams, really most of the teams, are pretty dysfunctional. But a few seasons ago, there were these two guys on the show, and if you watch the show, you may remember these guys, Zev and Justin. And our family was just really impacted by these guys and struck by watching them. The guy on the left is Zev, and he has Asperger's syndrome, and it affects him pretty severely in social settings. Now, his partner, Justin, the guy on the right with the beard, he is very high functioning, very winsome, very, very, very magnetic, winsome guy, and they have like the most amazing relationship. The guy with Asperger's would kind of, as you would imagine throughout the race, he would get uptight and he would get upset. And the other guy would just sort of calm him down, just sort of help him refocus and keep going. And for the first several episodes in watching this, I didn't really pay attention that closely, and I thought they were brothers. I mean, the way that they interacted and the way the one cared for the other, I figured these two have known each other their whole lives. But that's not the deal. They actually met at a summer camp, and they became friends there. And so I started thinking about how odd their friendship really is. Because Justin, the guy with the beard, is extremely magnetic. I mean, he's funny, he's witty, and my guess is, I'm just envisioning this camp, my guess is that he was really, really popular at camp. But because of Asperger's, Zev, he has all kinds of trouble socially. Meeting new people can just be overwhelming for him. Connecting in relationships is extremely difficult for him. So I'm just guessing here, I'm just projecting what I imagine happened. But I bet that at camp, Zev didn't have a lot of friends. And one day, Justin saw Zev at camp, and he could have ignored him. And I'll bet that a lot of people did. Or he could have been nice to him, maybe for a few days, kind of thing, until camp is over. And I bet a lot of people did that too. But something in Justin said, okay, look, if I was that guy, if I had Asperger's and I was nervous around people, I would want someone to reach out to me. I would want to be treated with respect and dignity. I would want someone to be my friend. Not just for a week, but for life. Now, I don't know what the circumstances really are too much for how they became friends. But my guess is that Justin initiated the friendship, that he reached out. And then to watch the two of them, years later, in a really high-stress situations, and to see them with this obvious history that they've had together, this rich friendship, it was really a beautiful thing for our family to watch. And Jen and I and the kids would just sort of marvel at this. And we would say to our kids, guys, that's how you be a friend. And so before each season starts, the show puts together a little clip of each team. And the teams talk about who they are and why they want to do the race and what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are and all that kind of stuff. And so we have a little promo clip that they made before they went on the show, and it's about 3 minutes. And what I want you to see as you watch this over the next 3 minutes is watch how Justin treats Zev. Okay, here we go.
We know each other from a camp called Greylock in Beckett, Massachusetts, where we went for about a decade each. I'm a little older than him, but I went for 10 years and he went for 9. And when I went back to be a counselor when I was about 25, we met and we've been friends ever since.
Yes. We wanted to be on Amazing Race because it is my dream, and now my dream is coming true. It's an awesome show, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Zev's been a big fan of the show for as long as I've known him, and he's been talking about going on this adventure. And this time around, he figured out when the application date was and motivated me to apply with him, and it all worked out. So it's really, he's the engine behind the whole thing, and I've sort of taken on the dream with him, and now I'm really excited about it too.
Justin's strength is that he's aggressive, but that's also a weakness. Gotcha there.
See how he did that?
I have a karma theory, so if he gets too aggressive, it might come back, and he pisses people off, it might come back to hurt us in the end. Sometimes he gets really, really competitive and into it, and he might lash out at me, and that would not be a good thing, because I might not take that very well. I might break his neck. No, I don't know. I'll be like, okay, settle down.
Yeah,
let's get going.
He's the cooler. He's there to calm me down. I definitely get a little into it at times. I'm trying to watch that. I think I'll be okay, but he's definitely the calmer, the cool, calm, and collected one of the two of us. I think Zev's strength is he knows the show really well, so that's going to be a big help. B, he's got a steel trap memory. He's really good at remembering details and things like that, so I think that's going to help us. This is a strength and a weakness. He's got very little filter when it comes to speaking his mind, so he definitely says what's on his mind, and I think that might get us into trouble at times, but it's also a good TV, I guess. Anything, sports related will be okay, I think. Running, lifting, it's the mind games that we're going to have some trouble with.
Speak for yourself. You don't want to be eliminated first. So yes. I think when we get over that, then it's on.
Right. We got to stay alive the first day.
And
if we're out first,
then
they're not going to let us come home.
Then it'll be big embarrassment.
We have hell to pay from our friends and family.
Yes. And I'm not the best people person.
Right. Basically, the toughest thing for him would be to go on a race around the world and have to deal with people. And that's what we're going to do. So we'll see what happens.
But it's going to be good times.
I think audiences can expect us to play the game on the up and up until somebody asks for something else. I think we're going to be straight shooters. I think we're going to hopefully be fun to watch. We're good guys, and hopefully we're the team that you're going to root for.
And hopefully they'll come along and enjoy the ride with us.
So if you're wondering, they didn't win, but they did actually win a leg of the race. They finished first, and when they finished first, they get all these other prizes, and so that was really cool. It was sad when they got out. Turns out that Justin actually was in charge of the passport, and he was digging through their passports, and he was digging through his bag at one point and kind of frantically, and the passports fell out, and they got eliminated because they couldn't keep racing. So it was pretty sad deal. But they were amazing to watch. And you only get like a glimpse into their friendship from that clip. But when you'd watch the race and you'd see them day after day in stressful situation after stressful situation, and Zev could get pretty upset sometimes. And it turns out he really doesn't have a filter. But Justin would just consistently be patient. And I don't think that it would work for them to be friends, otherwise. And so it was just such a cool thing to watch. And you could tell that for Justin, the friendship was always the highest priority. Like no matter what happened, no matter how stressful it got, no matter how much Zev got frustrated with him or blamed him, he would respond with grace over and over and over. It's just beautiful. And to watch this play out was just, it was a golden rule thing day after day after day. Just Justin asking moment by moment, okay, if I was him, and if I had Asperger's, and if I had trouble socially, and if I had trouble connecting with people, and if I had trouble filtering what I say, what would I want? And he's like, well, I guess I'd want someone to stand by me. I'd want someone to be my friend. Not just for a day or two or a week or two, but for a lifetime. So you know what? That's what I'm going to do. That's the kind of guy I'm going to be. And I have no idea where these guys are at spiritually, but that friendship is what Jesus is describing. It's the golden rule being lived out, and I guarantee you that God is pleased with it and he's honored by it. And in a very, very real way, that is a picture of heaven. That's heaven coming to earth. What is it that brings heaven to earth? It's golden rule living. Setting ourselves aside long enough to see somebody else and to look at them and think, if I were that person, how would I want to be treated? The problem is that we get so consumed with how we want to be treated, right? We get so consumed with our own agenda for our life. We get so worried that we're being mistreated, that we're being ignored, that we're being left out or left behind. And in all of that self-absorption, we miss these golden rule moments all the time. Heard a story a while back about a journalist. He got his first job writing for the Buffalo News. And his first job in journalism was writing the obituaries. But after a while, he got kind of frustrated with that. He's thinking about his own career aspirations and all of that, and he got really frustrated with his station in life and his station at this newspaper. And he thought, I could be doing Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporting, and I'm stuck doing obituaries. So one day, the frustration had kind of gotten to a boiling point, and he marched down to his editor's office, and he asked him, when am I going to get some decent story assignments? And his crusty old editor looked at him and just growled back, listen, kid, nothing you ever write will get read as carefully as what you are writing right now. You misspell a word, you mess up a date, and a family will notice, and a family will be hurt. But you do justice to somebody's grandmother, to somebody's mom. You make a life sing, and they will be grateful forever. They will put your words in laminate. And the guy later said, I never really thought of it like that. And after that, I pledged that I would make the extra calls, that I would ask the extra questions, that I would go the extra mile to write obituaries that deserve to be laminated. He took the golden rule and he applied it where it hadn't been applied before. Okay? Write obituaries for others as you'd want them to write an obituary for you. And the guy started writing golden rule obituaries. And it led to all kinds of other adventures in writing. See, here's the cool thing about the golden rule is at any moment, at any time, any place, any job, any setting, any interaction with another human being, could be writing on a bus, could be grocery shopping. At any moment, it could turn into a golden rule moment. Like you don't need a high IQ. You don't need a lot of money. You don't need a title. You don't need anything. In fact, sometimes those things get in the way because they start to make me think that my life is all about me. And they actually keep me from simply asking, what would I want if I were in this other person's shoes? And Jesus is inviting you and me to go on this golden rule adventure. To actually have our entire life revolve around the golden rule. Like every interaction. In your office this week. At Starbucks. Okay, with somebody at church after the service. Maybe in a little while when you go to lunch with some people at home this week, wherever it is. To not just respond in sort of this me-centered autopilot. It's all about my hopes, all about my dreams, all about my wants, my plans. Like everybody else is just, supporting actors in my movie. To not do that, to instead just pause, to take time to notice another person. Take a moment and think about, what's their story? What's her dream? What's his hope? And then think, what would I want if I were in that other person's shoes? And then use imagination and creativity and the initiative that God's given you. Like part of what's freeing about this golden rule life with God is that it is absolutely not this legalistic checklist deal. It's not something that you can go, yeah, okay, I did that, and cross it off when you're done. It's this endless adventure that requires empathy and thought and creativity. And your adventure is completely unique to you. No one else will do it in the same way that you do. Before Jen and I started Brookview, we had to go to this thing called a church planters assessment. And so before we could get the backing of the people that wanted to back us to start the church, they wanted to know that we were qualified, which is a good thought. And so we joined about 10 other couples at a retreat center in Canby, Oregon. And we were with these other couples that all wanted to start churches somewhere. And we spent a week doing pastorally kinds of things. And so, we would all preach. We had to work in teams. We had to plan stuff and then present stuff in groups. But the whole time, as we're doing all of this, we're like in a fishbowl. And there's all these evaluators sitting around the room in chairs watching us. And they're assessing everything. They're assessing how well we work in groups. They're assessing how well we interact with our spouse. Do we dishonor our spouse continually? Do we dominate a group? Are we way too sensitive to other people so that we don't say what actually needs to be said? Can we articulate our ideas clearly? Do we encourage other people often and effectively? Do we rally a team well? And so these people would sit silently on the edges, listening to every little comment, every little thing that's going on. And every once in a while, then, they would kind of look at you and go, and write something down. It was awkward. It's the most awkward week of my life. So at the end of the week, all the assessors then met together, and they would give a formal written recommendation for every couple that was there. And the evaluation would come in 3 grades. A couple could get a green light, which meant that we think this couple is ready to go start a church. Okay, we give them our unreserved recommendation. A couple could get a yellow light, which meant we think this couple could potentially start a church someday, but there are some things that need to happen before they're really ready. Or a couple could get a red light, which meant, in our opinion, this couple is not wired or gifted to be able to handle the demands of starting a church. So on the last week, or on the last day after a week of all of this, we were all about to get our reports. The news was coming. And for each of us, our sending agency, whatever denomination or whatever group that we came from, would also get a copy of the evaluation. And so our support would be contingent upon our grade. And so the guy running the assessment gathered all of us couples into a room, and before we got the reports, he prayed for all of us. And then he reminded us that whether we ended up being able to start churches or not, that each of us was special and unique to God. And it was a very tense moment for Jen and I. We were about to find out whether or not we'd be able to start Brookview. And we'd been working on this and planning and strategizing for 5 years. And all these other couples are in kind of the same boat. And this guy, right before we all went in to meet with an assessor to give us the report and to give us their recommendation, he read us a poem. And, for me, maybe it was just the intensity of the moment in my life in that moment. But as he read this poem, it just struck me deeply. And so I just want to read this to you because I think it paints such an unbelievable picture of how unique Every single life is. This is written by a woman named Dorothy Williams. She says, think about yourself. Think about what a remarkable, unduplicated, marvelous thing it is to be you. Of all the people who have come and gone on the earth, Eve, Moses, Cleopatra, Socrates, Joan of Arc, Richard III, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Madonna, George Clooney, not one of them is like you. No one who ever lived, not one who is to come, has had your combination of abilities, talents, appearance, friends, acquaintances, burdens, sorrow, or opportunities. No one's hair grows exactly the way yours does. No one's fingerprints are like yours. No one has the same combination of secret inside jokes or family expressions that you know. The few people that laugh at all the same things you do don't sneeze the way you do. No one prays about exactly the same concerns that you do. No one is loved by the same combination of people who love you. No one. No one before, no one to come. You are absolutely unique. Enjoy that uniqueness. You don't have to pretend in order to seem more like someone else. You weren't meant to be like someone else. You don't have to lie to conceal the parts of you that are not like what you see in anyone else. You were meant to be different. Nowhere ever in all of history will the same things be going on in anyone's mind, soul, and spirit as are going on in yours now. If you did not exist, there would be a hole in creation, a gap in history, something missing from God's plan for humankind. Treasure your uniqueness. It is a gift of God given only to you. Enjoy it. Share that uniqueness. No one can reach out to others in the same way that you can. No one can speak your words. No one can convey your meanings. No one can comfort with your kind of comfort. No one can bring your kind of understanding to another person. No one can be cheerful and lighthearted and joyous in your way. No one can smile your smile. No one else can bring the whole unique impact of you to another human being. Share your uniqueness. Let it be free to flow out among your family and your friends and the people you meet in the rush and clutter of living wherever you are. The gift of yourself was given you to enjoy, but not to hoard. Give yourself away. See the uniqueness around you in each person you meet. See it. Receive it. Let it inform you or nudge you or inspire you or comfort you. The collection of unique, irreplaceable beings around you now has never been available before and will not be in quite the same way again. And so, dear special, irreplaceable person, receive the gift of yourself and others. Notice the gift, enjoy it, celebrate it, and be very, very thankful. Here's the thing. Jesus is inviting you to go on this golden rule adventure. And that is so ridiculously freeing when you think about it. Because your adventure will be different from everybody else's. Only you can do what you can do. And so the point of a life with Jesus is not some list of religious rules. And the point isn't to copy the life or try to emulate the life of someone else. The point is for you just to be freed up to be you. And this is so incredible when you see this done in community with lots of different people coming together. For the last couple of years, Jen and I have led a life group on Tuesdays. Okay, so every Tuesday night, we meet with this group of 20-somethings. And they all have this way of bringing their unique selves to that group. And it is really, really cool. I mean, all of them are so different, and they're so good at so many things, but you see their personalities coming out in how they do group. For instance, Johnny Lay. He's this huge behind-the-scenes guy. And for many of you, you don't even know who he is because he's so behind the scenes. He's like stealth. And he loves to just quietly serve. And he's incredibly thoughtful. Jen and I have this Keurig coffee machine. If you've been to our house, you've probably had a drink of coffee from our Keurig coffee machine. And so we serve coffee to our group every week. Well, apparently, Johnny, I don't know exactly what happened, but I'm guessing, again, I'm projecting. I think Johnny had this thought one time. And he was like, you know what? That must get expensive to have, like the group drink your coffee every week. And it must be a pain to have to replace all the Keurig cups all the time. Okay? So every week, Johnny brings with him a box of Keurig to replace our Keurig cups. And he brings with him a quart of half and half. And one time he noticed that our sugar was getting low, and he brought with him a 5-pound bag of sugar. It's just like, yes, I love you. Jeremy and Katie Creelman are some of the kindest people I've ever met. And they love to serve as well. And they're quiet and they're kind of often, they're behind the scenes. And so very often with our group, they'll just show up with some really like crazy extravagant treats that they made up before they came over. And man, it's really good stuff. Tony Ellersick, among a whole list of incredible things, he is a huge encourager. I mean, the guy just loves to go nuts, genuinely go nuts over someone else's success. And I cannot possibly count how many times I've heard that guy say, dude, you killed it. His wife, Rebecca, as you know, she can sing like an angel. And sometimes Tony and Rebecca will lead worship at our group. They did it a couple weeks ago, and man, she can just like melt the paint off the walls with that voice of hers. James Fan, the guy has the spiritual gift of gathering people. And now, like he knows how to get people together and how to get them excited. And so almost every week, after all the old people, which is Jen and I, after it gets too late and we go to bed, most of the group goes out. And week after week, somehow James gets all of these people to go out until like midnight. And then sometimes he gets them all together during the middle of the week. And what happens, see, is that deeper friendships are formed. And I could literally go on and on and on about all of the different people in our group. I could talk about different things that they all do that are so beautiful. It's incredible. But they're all doing this golden rule thing in their own way. And they're all just kind of making it up as they go. And it's so beautiful. And by the way, we have lots and lots of fantastic life groups. And if you're here this morning and you're not in one, I would just encourage you to at least check it out and see if that might be a fit for you. I mean, these groups meet weekly. Right now, we sort of follow the college system as far as how it's scheduled out. So we have a fall quarter, a winter quarter, and a spring quarter. And right now, we're right in between winter quarter and spring quarter. So if you're wanting to get started with one, this is the perfect time to do it because they're all kind of kicking into something new and rebooting for spring quarter. Then if you look around at the end of spring quarter and you're like, I hate these people, you can quit. But I'd encourage you to check it out and try it because it can be a beautiful thing. And I want to point out one other thing about this golden rule life. Can I just say that it's so much richer than the alternative? But if we're not careful, we can start to think of it like as a sacrifice. The reality is it's not a sacrifice at all. The truth is, if you choose to orient your life around the golden rule, you're going to end up with more love and more joy and more friendship than you know what to do with. Because that's the law of inversion in the kingdom of God. Those who put themselves last end up being first. When you pour yourself out, you find yourself being filled up. I mean, James is filled up by gathering people. Tony is filled up by encouraging people. Rebecca is filled up by melting the paint off the walls of my living room. Johnny is filled up by being generous. And I'm just projecting again here, but I'll bet that Justin is filled up by his relationship with Zev. I'll bet that if you asked him, he would tell you that it's really hard sometimes. But I bet he'd also tell you that there has been nothing else in his life like it. That he actually gets way more out of it than he could ever describe. Because that's what happens when we choose this way of life. Okay, one final thing about the golden rule, and some of you know this. Virtually every religion virtually every tradition has some version of the golden rule. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing because it reflects that our world has some moral content. That there's actually a good way to live and a not so good way to live. And thoughtful human beings have always recognized this. Okay, what's distinct about Jesus is he didn't just give the rule, he gave himself. So we don't follow a philosopher or even just a great moral thinker. We follow a man who was the Son of God. And he set aside his deity to take on human flesh, and he lived without flaw the golden rule life. And when the time came, he laid down that life. And so this morning, we aren't just admiring this great human teacher from antiquity. We're worshiping the one who gave himself for us. He didn't just talk about golden rule living, he embodied it. He went all the way with it.